Zoom record. And then we're going to go ahead and have our reports. So if we could start with, well, everybody's welcome to the net. Realize that we're usually talk about medical topics. Today we're talking about amateur radio. But the Medical Amateur Radio Council are a group of amateurs that are in health-related fields or interested in health-related fields. And today we're not talking about a medical topic, but when we do, we talk about it from the perspective of the patient. And it's not medical advice, but it's quite useful information hearing it from the lens of fellow amateurs that are involved in these professions. So you'll get a lot more depth and interest than you would otherwise get in just a friendly fireside chat. But this is one that's a fireside chat, having a doctor by the side, or a nurse, or a pharmacist, in different areas of the health professions. That makes it even more interesting. To start off our net here today, let's hear from our president, KD5QHV. Go ahead, Bernie. KD5QHV, can we get a president's report? Go ahead.
NPTSC signed in, and there was just another one. AC9CS, Kilo Charlie 9, Charlie Sierra.
KN2M, is Bernie making his report? I'm not copying him. Go ahead, Dave.
I have no copy on Bernie, but I do have, hold on a second. I do have NPTSC checking out, so.
Yeah, I have two additional check-ins, KC9CS by relay. And we have Diane NM2K. Are there any other check-ins? Make your call. Okay, go ahead, relay. Okay, thank you, M4TSC. Appreciate that. Are you copying me here at all, our president, KD5QHV? Okay, could you go ahead and make a president's report?
The Zoom computer and came back in here when I heard you say something about me. Good morning, one and all. It's the KD5QHV, Bernie and Sunny El Paso. And we're moving down the road. James got some interesting topics coming up, and we're certainly willing to participate, and we hope everyone else is as well. With that, I'll send out, by the way, I'll get back up one. Dave and Dave for being there, and Jay for doing the presentations and take control and so on and so forth. And of course, Chuck for running up the CWNet. So back to you, KD5QHV.
Okay, thank you very much, Bernie. And we appreciate the comments. We're going to be together here, of course, at Dayton. And we're looking forward to attending together, as well as the other members that are going to come. We're going to be in booth 4008, the same booth as the same building as the prize booth. So we look forward to your participation in the meeting that we're holding. And if not the meeting, at least seeing you there, stop by the booth and check in and say hello. So giving a little bit of a secretary's report, that's where our main focus is. And Barry, WB1FFI, is traveling today, our president-elect, so he's not with us. Just a word of information. We do have a recording going here on marcoaudio.net, both live streamed and being recorded, courtesy of N5 RTF, who does a wonderful job selecting a web SDR that copies all the different participants. So he knows who's going to be speaking, at least on the presenting side. It makes all the extra effort so that you don't have to go searching for a web SDR. If my signal QSBs and fades out, go to marcoaudio.net, and you'll be able to pick up the program there. We'll be starting the program momentarily for those of you on Zoom, and I see we've got Bill now on Zoom, KC9CS. So thank you for being here with us, guys. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen to start up the program, and then we'll start talking about our program for today. So it should be up right now, the screen, and you can see what we're talking about here, which is digital net. So as we can tell by the propagation today and all the different relays we're doing, there's ways to make HF nets work. We do have some check-ins from California that had to do it by relay. So we're ending up having a wonderful HF net, but it's sort of regional and being skipped the way it is. It makes it difficult to have roundtable discussions. We're going to talk a little bit about great enhancements for roundtable discussions by way of digital nets and ways to do it in an entry-level, non-technical fashion. They make it convenient for members who may have had an experience with digital radios before that perhaps they felt overwhelmed by or just not appropriate. There's other reasons why one might do what we're going to suggest in terms of entry level. We'll talk about that in detail. So let me come here and we'll start that conversation. So, what are you trying to catch in a net anyway? I mean, you know what a fishing net is. If you're going to have a successful fishing net, you have intricate knotting techniques and specific patterns to ensure the strength and durability of those nets. And if it's not completed and manufactured correctly, you're not going to be successful in achieving your goals. And to make a living as a fisherman, that means you wouldn't catch your intended target. So, what about amateur radio nets? What about ham radio nets in general on HF? Are you going to catch the target audience you're looking for? And we're having trouble with that with propagation, even at this point of the solar cycle. And if we tried a different band, we would still have the same issues. I mean, picking a time for a net is difficult enough. But there are issues at hand that make HF nets very difficult. And we're going to talk more about adjuncts, perhaps in the digital world, that would improve the quality of the net. And there's no one way. I mean, there's many different ways to augment this. So when we talk about traditional HF nets, that participation is important. And if people can't participate or get frustrated because of propagation, it makes it problematic, especially for an organization like Marco, where we have a worldwide membership. Now, we're here as an organization. We're open to the entire amateur world on 20 meters, and that's a wonderful aspect of having an HF net. And of course, we do also stream as well, courtesy of N5RTF chip. And we do use relays. Today we've had 2 Daves doing relays, and actually we've had Bernie doing relays as well. So we've had relays from New York and relays from Virginia and relays from Texas, and that does help. But on the other hand, it's not necessarily the same as everybody directly being able to hear each other, particularly when you're talking about a topic that you want to get the word out to all. So, what are the inhibitions to participation? I mean, propagation we talked about, but even if you had propagation, you still have to have a capable QTH. Many of our members can't have HF stations or the HF stations that they had from years ago because they're in a deed restricted community. That prohibits a reasonable antenna. I mean, there's ways to be involved in amateur radio that overcome some of the limitations of quality antennas and having a little bit of power and having the radios that you might have had in the past when you had a house. But if you move to another QTH and the QTH is different, you can enjoy amateur radio, maybe through FT8, but that doesn't mean that you're going to have the capability of hearing and speaking on voice, because the antennas can be a problem as well in many neighborhoods. Power you should overcome, but power is not going to make up for an antenna. And the availability, if you're not at home, how are you going to be involved in the HF net? There's no portability to it. And as far as propagation is concerned, we know that I've got members here. KC9CS is here with us today from Florida. He's on the backside of my beam. And even if I was pointed towards them, Bill, you're going to be in a skip zone. So as we talk about propagation, we know there's different layers of the atmosphere, and all that is wonderful, but where does that signal land? Where's the skip zone? Is it multiple hop? How many bounces? What's the incident angle of your antenna? Where's that signal going to land on the other side? What time of day are we on? What frequency are we choosing? All that becomes a factor. Chip has been wonderful in doing web SDRs. So what he'll do, and we'll talk a little bit about web SDRs for a minute, pick a radio receiver on the internet somewhere that's able to record the conversations. Chip will search during the day for the best web SDR that matches the transmission patterns of the speakers for the net. And he spends a lot of time and energy in Chip's calls N5RTF. These are live streamed at marcoaudio.net. Marcoaudio.net. They're also recorded. You can listen to them later if you're not available at the time of the net. That being said, even though I'm talking about web SDRs being available to everyone, we don't want our members necessarily going searching for their own web SDR for a number of reasons. One is Chip's already idealized this. So it's for our presenters. And secondly, there's limitations in how many people can use a web SDR at one time. And if Chip's using that, you may actually interfere with the ability of him to use one of interest. However, you can play with web SDRs and research. I think web SDR, I'm not sure if it's .org, but there's different locations of the SDRs. They'll tell you where there are, what frequencies. You can play with that. If you happen to not have a wonderful receiver or propagation doesn't favor you at the time, particularly other than when you're using the net, play with them directly. And marcoaudio.net has a server, and if you bring that up there, Chip's got all the recordings there for you, and you can bring them up at any time. While the net is ongoing, there's a button to click for the live stream audio. I'm going to pause for a second and look for additional check-ins. This is AA4FL for the Medical Amateur Radio Council. Ran rounds in the air looking for check-ins. Make your call. Okay, I do see we have some that are checking in by NetLogger. So we do use NetLogger. We'll talk about NetLogger a little bit more as we get further into the presentation. So NetLogger is a program or an adjunct that allows me to get instant messages. So I can go ahead and find out who's listening and who's finding out of our net through NetLogger, which is a list of all the nets that are announced on a particular day. Many people will find that rather than going to 14.342 and hearing the net live. Are there any questions right now before I continue on with the presentation? Go ahead and advance your question to AA4FL. Pausing moment for questions. Okay, we're moving on here with the presentation. What about the continuing medical education we've had in the past? What about discussing medical topics and doing so on nets? I mean, is it possible in the future to go back to CME1 and CM2 credit, even if it was just once a month and having the informational nets in between? Well, what are the issues with continuing medical education? I personally have written education in the past, and I've done it for the Florida Dental Association back in the late 1990s. And in doing so, when I designed those courses, they're peer reviewed. And that credit was issued through the Florida Dental Association as an organization. So it counted for relicensure. But they're peer reviewed. Do you really want to have one person trying to do CME 1 credit? Maybe CME 2 credit would work. But you really need to be peer reviewed for CME 1. And it has to be useful to the end user. If you're a cardiologist and you're hearing about ophthalmology, perhaps you could make that connection with psychiatrists and ophthalmology. I'm sure there's connections to be made there too, but it doesn't mean that your specialty board is going to honor those particular courses for your relicensure. And from state to state, the rules are different as well. But even if we were able to do that, on HF, how can you engage everybody? How can you have everybody ask questions? They can barely hear each other. It's just not a good roundtable way to have an interactive net to discuss and something as important as continuing medical education. So we'll leave that open for the future. But as of right now, that's the reason why temporarily we've discontinued that. But is digital VHF and UHF ham radio a solution to the challenges of these issues involving the HF nets? And what about simultaneously being able to run a digital net and HF net in the future? I've already put the feelers out with the ARL to see what they think and see who might have some wisdom on leading us down that path. But what are the issues with digital radio? We mentioned earlier at the beginning of this session that perhaps you may have tried a digital mode like DMR, gotten frustrated by code plugs. If that was your first experience with digital radio, we don't want that to be an inhibition to becoming further involved in the future. So there are some limitations in it. Things are proprietary. That was DMR. What if you have a D-Star radio, a Yaesu radio that's using Yaesu Fusion or C4FM? And the technologies, how do you talk to each other? Is it a Tower of Babel? Are you not able to talk to your friends? I mean, there's other issues that perhaps with time will be circumvented, but we do have some solutions now. I'm thinking of when I got started in doing digital scans for dentistry, with dental impressions for crowns and bridge work and implants. And in the early days, everybody had their own format. They had their own platform. And if they weren't able to be used by dental labs, how are you going to get that information? You think a dental lab is going to take 4 or 5 different manufacturers and make it practical to process the digital data? Same thing's going on here in ham radio right now. There are some solutions. We want to come up with a digital modality for our members. It's simple. It's pretty much plug and play. A way to introduce yourselves to digital radio without the overhead of the learning curve. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. So is a radio even needed? I mean, think about radios. You've got a handheld radio, you might have a base radio, you might have a mobile radio, different QTHs. Are you going to rely on a repeater or a hotspot? We'll briefly talk about repeaters and hotspots. But would that be a simple entry level? No, I mean, smartphones might be, but even with smartphones, there's limitations in operating system because, as mentioned earlier, in an earlier net today, there's a big involvement or a cost involvement. I believe the wisdom of one of our members, WJB Andy, talked about how much it actually costs to get some of the operating systems, iOS in particular, for the average amateur that's developing something they want to share. The financial impact of that may not be friendly to iOS. So what about dongles just plug into your computer? I mean, EchoLink in the past had been a way for smartphones to do analog. You just register your ID number and then can sign on to EchoLink. What if you can do the same thing with a dongle? So even if you don't have a dongle right now, you probably should go ahead and get a digital ID. This was a comment from WJB Andy, a wise comment, that you can go onto the look for DMR registration, get your digit for ID number for DMR, and then when it comes time you want to try a dongle or some other digital mode, you have your ID number all set and ready to go. So we'll talk more again about hotspots, but we're shooting for the easiest technology right now that's entry level. Once you, as a member, you get started on digital radio using a dongle, which is nothing more than a plug into your computer and freely available software that we can easily guide you through, then it's time to explore what's available in the digital world. I'm going to pause for a second before I get into the different digital modes and see if there's any questions. If there are, make your call to AA4FL. Okay, thank you. We have a check-in here, KE5BQK. Thank you for checking in from Texas there. It's nice to have you with us, Linda. Are there any other late check-ins? Any other check-ins? Make a call to AA4FL. KN2M, yes, KN2M Dave in Buffalo. Would you like to see if you can relay any check-ins to a CQ Marco? Okay, thank you for trying. We're going to continue on with the Zoom presentation. And we realize we have simultaneously a Zoom presentation running. So if you're a Marco member and listening on the web SDR, we distributed the link for the Zoom presentation in an email that went out through the Google group. If you're not a member of the Marco Google group, please consider doing so. We are in the process of converting to Wild Apricot membership activity, which is an online vehicle for doing so that's more effective for members, organizational structure, and be able to hopefully share information more easily. But in the meantime, we're using a Marco Google group for sharing important information of a timely nature. And of course, also when an ether is released, we announce that on the Google group. But let's talk about digital modes for a minute in that Tower of Babel. We wouldn't want to frustrate our members by saying, okay, let's buy a particular radio. Because if we did, you're going to be buying one mode. You might already have a different radio from a different manufacturer that doesn't talk to the mode. We don't expect you to make an investment. So when we talk about a dongle, we're picking a software and a piece of hardware that allows you to do all the major digital modes for about $100. A little over $100, and the software is free. We can walk you through the setup of that. So it's a great entry level to explore. And then as I talk about these digital modes, you can explore the modes and what's available on the modes, the different groups that are available to participate in, et cetera, et cetera. So digital mobile radio, one of the first ones here, uses time division multiple access, which is TMDA, to allow two users to share a single frequency. So it was common in commercial and public safety communications, an ability to transmit multiple conversations simultaneously on the same frequency, both supporting voice and data communications, so things like call alerts, text messaging, location tracking. So it also has a network of repeaters and talk groups on amateur radio allow us to communicate with others worldwide. So we talk about the digital modes. We're talking about taking a digital signal and finding a ramp to the internet, which then takes voice over internet protocols and allows different networks remotely or different individuals that are on ramping to the internet in a fashion other than repeaters. And we start to allow to have worldwide communication in real time. So we also have D-Star, which you'll see, and we'll talk about the manufacturers that have the different modes. And D-Star Digital Smart Technologies for amateur radio, voice and data protocol also uses a different frequency division, multiple access, FDMA, to allow multiple users to share a single frequency. And the manufacturers that allow you to operate with their radios, it can be on 2 meters, 70 centimeters, and 23 centimeter amateur bands. And Yaesu has YSF, or Yaesu System Fusion, also uses FDMA, supports digital and analog communications on the same frequency. So it's backwards compatible with existing analog FM radios. And one of our members here, Keith, K3IM, N3IM, excuse me, uses Yaesu Fusion and finds that to be much easier. So I'm going to pause for a minute and let him make a comment about Yaesu Fusion. Keith, would you like to say a little something in 3IM? This is AA4FL.
Well, I use a hotspot with my Yaesu System Fusion, but we have a System Fusion repeater here in the area, which is one of the reasons why I went with Yaesu to start with. But I found that it's much easier to get on the various modes with the Yaesu than it is with the DMRs. For some reason, Yaesu System Fusion seems to be much more user-friendly. That being said, going through a repeater, it's very easy.
On Zoom, so everybody knows he's talking on Zoom.
very easy to use, but anyway, that's my comment.
Okay, thank you, Keith. We appreciate the comment there. Keith was making a presentation on Zoom for those of you that didn't copy him here on the net. You'll be able to hear his comments later on the recording. He finds that much easier to use. In terms of, we think about DMR. For anybody that's had DMR, you got to set up a code plug. You got to have a computer. You got to know all the different repeaters. With some of the other technologies, allow you to go directly. But when we talk about the dongle, we don't have to worry about all that. It's all done in the background. Yes, you're going to have to know what mode you want to use and what group you want to sign on to, but it's easy. It's just very straightforward. You're not having to circumvent the learning curve. But this is true of both base station handhelds and mobile radios. And the ICOMs and the Kenwoods are using D-Star. But you also have Yaesu using C4FM, and radios like the Anytones or some of the Titeras, the other less expensive radios that use DMR. I mean, the advantage is the radios are less expensive, but on the other hand, the learning curve is much, much greater. Then you have repeaters that are locally. So you buy a digital ham radio, you have to have a repeater that's on that same mode in your area to get connected to other hams locally over an extended area or via the internet. So if you buy a DMA radio, you have a Yaesu Fusion repeater in your area, it's not going to do you any good. And the same that's true for D-Star. So you must be compatible with the digital mode of the repeater radio that you buy. And other hams want to talk to you, must be using the same digital protocol. So if you have a friend in another state or another country, you're going to have to overcome that as well. It's an issue. So the additional issue that's not true on a dongle, how and what you want is available on a particular repeater differs by the host of the repeater, because that host of the repeater basically is a control station. They choose what they want to make available on the repeater, not necessarily the choices that you want to, or the stations that there may only be 10 choices on that particular repeater. Maybe you want to talk to a talk group in France, or something that you want to talk to that's specific to a particular other hobby, like trains, model trains, or real trains. You're not going to be able to necessarily do that on your local repeater. Chances are you probably will not. So hotspots is what Keith was mentioning here, for those of you who are able to hear Keith. He uses his fusion with a hotspot. So it's another way to on-ramp to the internet. If you think about your digital signal, what you're trying to do is find a portal to get that to another location. That's where the web comes in. I mean, that's the net. Now, the web is a worldwide net of connections, whereas that's not true necessarily otherwise on HF. We're having difficulty if we're getting from point A to point B, but you're connecting radio networks through the hotspots. So the device that makes your signal available in the extended area, it then allows the people that are on the other end to talk to you. It makes them available on your own radio and pick up their signals. But the radio and hotspots still must be set up with the details required for successful communication to occur. So it's still a lot more difficult than the dongle. You use the digital mode of your radio, and how and what is available now becomes set up within your own radio, because you define what sites or groups you want to transmit to. So that overcomes the limitations of repeaters. Plus the hotspot runs off your own internet service in your house. So you have a lot more control that way. But that being said, it's still not an entry-level experience. It's not what we want all our members to necessarily be doing. But dongles are available, and a dongle, a little device with a chip that just plugs into the side of your computer with associated software. Those are readily available and very inexpensive. The one that comes to mind, there's two, Northwest Digital Radio, but the one I use is a DV Stick 30. It's a DV Mega DV Stick 30, made by a ham in the Netherlands. Very easy to use. So you just plug it into your computer. So if it's a dongle and you just plug it into your computer, it just sticks out. It's a little, looks like a memory stick would look. And when you plug it in, it's just connected to the computer in that way. But you do need, with the dongle, obviously with the computer, some way of getting your signal in, your voice in, and listening. So usually you use a headset with mic and speaker, and the dongle itself has a special chip in it, an AMBI 3000 vocoder chip that allows you to choose these different modes when you have associated software that's appropriate. Now, you can plug the dongle in indirectly using an extender, a USB extender, which might be a little safer from you accidentally laying something on that dongle and breaking a connection. So you might want to consider that as well. In April QST, or April 2024, on page 48, there's another similar version that connects via a cable. So that goes into the computer instead of plugging it directly through an interface cable. And it's a little bit easier, it seems, to work with. Unfortunately, it's available in process and was reviewed, but there's not a stock right now. But we'll talk a little bit here about how one might evaluate where to find these different products. So Gigaparts does carry them. So if you go to Gigaparts, you can go on and just look for DV Mega products. And when you do, you'll see the Stick 30 is only $110. It's and the software is free. So you can start your digital experience with a lot of flexibility, find out what you really like, and then expand into DV radio directly through base station, handheld, mobile, find out what feeders are in your area, what hotspots would be required. And more importantly, by getting on now through the dongle, you'll have the support and help of other hams and Marco that are already active. We do have a digital net. Right now, the digital net meets on Sunday morning because that's when our HF net works, operates. There's a long history of why the Grand Rounds of the Year is on Sunday mornings. But if we think how many people go to church, I think the average is in the 40% that go regularly on a weekly basis, that we're losing a lot of Marco members. We've been talking about doing a digital net on Thursday evenings, late enough where all time zones in the United States can participate. And if that comes to fruition, then we'll have a modality for doing so and open it up to a lot of Marco members that have not. I'm going to go ahead and break just for ID here, as we should always. This is AA4FL for the Medical Ambulance Radio Council, Grand Rounds of the Year, breaking for ID. Okay, breaking the presentation for the ID, obviously. AA4FL for the Medical Ambulance Radio Council, Grand Rounds of the Year. Going to pause one for any questions or comments before we continue on with the program. Okay, not hearing any comments or questions. So the DV Mega products you can find there, and you can also go online and look at the website for BlueDV. And if you go to BlueDV and Google that, you'll find out a little bit more about the technology. How you take that signal, which is pulse mode modulation, the process that converts analog audio signals or waveforms to digital audio signals. And then it has a chip, the AMBI 3000, which goes ahead and voice compresses a solution for high performance speech compression hardware into a DSP based vocoder. So it gives you that signal now into different modes. And using their software, you have a choice of the Star, DMR, Fusion, and any other newer modes that they have available. So that the very powerful entry level happens to have the easiest learning curve. And actually very little bit of a learning curve. And you just plug in the dongle or any other vocoder device into the computer, bring up the BlueDV software, as simple as a laptop that can go anywhere with you as long as you have an internet signal and you're ready to go. You can participate on the net with mobility from any location. Again, please do evaluate the BlueDV website. David, PA7 LIM, is the amateur that does the software, invents software, and supports the software. And you, of course, unfortunately, because of Apple products being a little more difficult to work with, he's not supporting the Apple operating system. So it's the one limitation here. With BlueDV, you're going to need to use Windows, although he has a version called Peanut that will run on Android phones. So currently it's a little bit of an issue with iOS systems. On his page, you can look and see all the different operating systems he supports. So Linux is there. So you will be able to use Android and Linux. And peanut information about smartphone Android use is also on his website. You can register. There's a registration page for peanut. Then you'll be able to use your smartphone if you have an Android and have an entry level that way, other than the dongle. And you register easily for peanut. I did. I registered, and within 24 hours, he had sent me my registration number. It's kind of like Echolink, you know, you have to have be an amateur. People say, well, maybe this is an amateur, but it is. I mean, it's just an added plus plus. I mean, recent issues of QST, the CO's columns, the president's columns, well, I guess it was the operating officer, publishers' columns at the front of QST talk quite a bit about the internet as an adjunct or an added plus to amateur radio. It's not substituting for amateur radio, it's making amateur radio better. And this is one of those situations. Once you have the BlueDV software installed, what it has is different buttons, and those different buttons allow you, first of all, to connect to your computer with your serial interface. And then once you're connected, it has a button that you can choose DMR, D-Star, Fusion, NXDN, any other modes that they have. And those are currently expanding, and there'll be a last heard window where you'll actually see who else is using the mode at that current time. There is a setup screen for BlueDV for Windows, and we'll get that information to you. If you monitor the Zoom recording later, you'll be able to see the setup screen. And that information is pretty much templated. You won't have to change very much. You might, in a different geographic area, have to pick a different server. If you're outside the United States or on the West Coast, there may be better servers, but all that information is going to be on the website and also off this one page, which will really give you a lot of shortcuts in doing so. So now that you've got your ramp to the internet, still, you're picking one mode at a time. You're only talking to one mode at a time. So how do we overcome that for the Medical Amateur Radio Council so we can talk to each other and have a true digital net? That's what we're going to be talking about next. Before I do that, one last time, let's pause for any questions or comments. This is AA4FL for the digital, for the Medical Amateur Radio Council programs on the internet, taking questions or comments. Make your call. Okay, none at this time. So transcoding networks. There are networks. We have a wonderful group of volunteers called the QuadNet Array that have a system that allow for conversion of the different modes to have a common location that we can talk. It's a network that supports all the modes, certainly the major modes of D-Star, DMR, and Fusion. So when we have our nets, some of us are coming in by D-Star, some by DMR, some by Fusion, some are coming in by hotspots, some are coming in by repeaters, including from Japan. We have JA0BXP Etsu, who comes and participates in the nets. The issue is not a technological issue for Etsu, it's a time of day issue because we have a net in the evening. He's seeing patients in the morning Japan time. And if we have our net in the morning here, stateside, he's having to stay up very late to participate in the net. But he does. So the QuadNet Array, and you can Google the QuadNet Array, it's openquad.net, and learn a little bit about their mission statement. They're dedicated volunteers that provide the technology as well as the vehicle, the venue for us doing this. And they explain a little bit about the transcoding, how it's done with the channels. And you can read about all the different screens are in the Zoom presentation, numerous screenshots of limited information, but the entire information is on the website. But the Open QuadNet Array, the OpenNet Array, what it does is it has all these different transcoded entry points. So you might have smart groups or reflectors, or they don't do DMR Brandmeister. They use DMR Plus. So if you're using traditional DMR, that just hasn't been reliably integrated, and they've moved over to DMR Plus and still going to a newer DMR version that's going to be coming up lately. There's constantly new developments in the world of digital amateur radio. The dongles, you won't have to really worry about that. That's the other beauty of the dongle. But as you explore more often on the DMR side, there's always new twists, making it challenging for the individuals at the QuadNet array to maintain the transcoding for that. But there's also YACE system fusion, where you get the C4 FM servers and wires X. And currently there's no entry point for HF, but that's possible in the future. You could look on their site, see the current status. If you were wanting to know if one of the reflectors was working, you'll be able to look up when the server is working, know if it's active in real time. You can also see live QuadNet information of who's using QuadNet at any particular time. That's one of the screens that's in the Zoom presentation as a capture. And the QuadNet modes are explained, the different reflectors, the different DMR participation in the settings, the entry points that you need. But we'll have that all set up for members on the sample page for BlueDV. If you buy the dongle, you purchase a dongle, and then you can start to explore as you want to technologically become more savvy. I'm not technologically savvy. I'm relying on the dongle right now, but I do plan on expanding my digital involvement. There is a getting started page on the QuadNet array as well. So the QuadNet modes, as we spoke about, DMR Plus, YACE System Fusion, D-Star, instructions are on the site for how to use them, how to set them up. And I'm going to pause one as I exit that information. We're going to talk about some of the other adjuncts that are available, but any question about the QuadNet array that I might be able to answer or comments, go ahead and make your call to AA4FL. Grand Rounds here, having our program here today. This is AA4FL. Make your call. No additional comments at this time, at least heard directly by your control station. But NetLogger is a software that you can download that allows you to see who is on the logged into the net through NetLogger. And it's commonly used for many HF nets. There's some examples in the Zoom presentation, but you'll see the screenshot. But probably more for HF than for the HF UHF digital nets, 40-meter nets, 80-meter nets, 20-meter nets. Ours is always on there when we do ours on Sunday mornings. And with NetLogger, it allows for an instant message feature where you can chat with each other. Now, I'm not getting any current questions being submitted by NetLogger, but we did have Keith M3IM. He gave me information about one of our check-in stations. The information can be valuable. It also gives us a chance to save our log of check-ins. It tells where the stations are. There's their locations, their call signs, their names. Very valuable information when you're running a net, and everybody can see that when you're using NetLogger. And then there's a download for that, easy download, no problem at all. And as you're on NetLogger and you see the different nets in progress, beyond just Medical Amateur Radio Council, there's numerous nets. So on Sunday morning, let's see what time, Saturday, perhaps I logged in early to see what nets were up and running. Maybe it was middle of the day. But there was morning groups, there were Air Force's fire clubs. At that time, there was California Hawaii Net, looking at Victory Fellowship Net, DMR Coffee Net, Salvation Army Saturn Nets, real important. Their net was on there as well. In addition to being on 20 meters, I meet on 20 meters. There was a submarine veterans net going on. There was also a YL system net going on. NetLogger, again, that requires the computer, but what if there was an app to make it easy to look at on your phone? And there is. It's called NetLogger Companion, and that you can download at the iOS App Store or on Google Play. And you can open that up on your mobile device and do the same things that we're doing. You can go ahead and look at all the different check-ins for the nets. And then you can also see the instant message window. So that's very powerful. And if you don't want to tie up your computer, or if you're on the road and want to see what nets are going, that's all available to you. So this is just a small discussion of a lot different topics. The point is, if you don't get started, you can't explore all these opportunities. And it's really inexpensive and easy to use. And we'll all walk you through that. We've got a digital net for doing that. We'll even do Zoom sessions if that's what it takes. So please consider getting a dongle and working with us. Give it a try. Coupled with BlueDV and a computer, it gives you a chance to try different digital modes, explore the technology before buying digital radios and hotspots, which you're making an investment in certain modes at that time. And of course, most importantly to me, join our digital net for a true roundtable format where everybody can be involved and benefit from each other's knowledge. That's what's missing right now on the HF nets. We just can't hear each other. We're an organization. Organizations have members. Members need to talk to each other. Very valuable to have a digital net available for that, but only if our members become digitally enabled. Do you want to rely on Zoom sessions occasionally for that? Come on, guys. If you have the digital net, once we have enough of our members there, you can have a 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7-day-a-week opportunity of making contact with other Marco members. Just set up a common meeting site. I know the Quadnet Array, we can be there at specific times, foster those friendships and professional camaraderie. Where you merge the hobby into professional interest. That's why you're a Marco member. So please consider giving it a try. Thank you for participating today and for considering the opportunity of joining the digital net. This is AA4FL for the Medical Amateur Radio Council, Grand Rounds on the Internet for ID. Are there any comments on the HF side? Comments or questions? Make your call to AA4FL. Okay, I am not hearing any. From a late check-in standpoint, I do have Jeff, WW9F, checked in. Are there any other stations that would like to check in, make a call to AA4FL? We do have a special presentation next week, so I hope you'll be here for the Grand Rounds on the Internet. You know, in a few weeks here, we have Mother's Day coming up. We're not going to be on the air for Mother's Day. We're going to honor the women in our lives. The best way to honor the women, whether they're hams or not, is to do something other than amateur radio. And this is their day to be recognized. I'm not saying that there aren't women in amateur radio. There are. Have a rich history. And with STEM education now being focus of elementary and middle school and high school education, we're getting more and more women involved in amateur radio. But the week before next week's session of the Grand Rounds, KN2M and M2K, Dave and Diane from Buffalo, the Rodmans, are going to be net control for a presentation on the women in amateur radio, the history of women amateur radio, amateur radio today. So please do participate next week. It will be the last session for a few weeks, because the following week is Mother's Day. And then in addition, we also have coming up the Ham Convention. So we won't be meeting in Ham Convention weekend as well. There might be a CW event, but we won't be having the Grand Rounds on the air that night. So it'll be a 2-week hiatus. Next week, we hope that you'll be present and learn all about women and amateur radio. Any questions about that? Make a call to AA4FL now. And thank you for participating in the net today. I always enjoy doing the nets, but I'm going to stop the recording right now. Resume.